Welcome to day 2 of AWE USA 2022. We're in the future. Today, Grand Baier-Lentz will feature startups and investor track, including the startup pitch competition following this panel. My name is Finn Staber. I'm the CEO of Chicken Waffle. We're a game development studio in Austin, Texas, developing and publishing immersive content, and really like to focus on innovative technology, and have recently created the Indie XR Creator Fund, focused on partnering with innovative developers and startups, building really cool stuff and helping them bring their cool content to fruition. So it's an honor to be hosting the panel, or hosting the track today. A few reminders about AWE. AWE Live is the new app you can download, or you can just use the AWE site at awe.live. You can customize your own agenda and find exhibitors, and there's an attendee connection platform on there. So there's some special events today. There's a happy hour sponsored by Vario, 5:30 to 6:45 inside the playground, which is on the other side of the expo hall. If you just walk all the way through, pretty cool booth over there. They have drink tickets scanned from your badge, and some light hors d'oeuvre food provided as well. I don't know if they have any chicken and waffles, but and then tonight is the Augie Awards. So they have 15 categories, as well as 3 Best in Show categories, which I've won 3 times, which is a big honor. And so be sure to show up for that. It's a great energy and a lot of smiles, seeing people, rewarded for their hard work. You can watch the Augies on the main stage in the Mission City Ballroom tonight at 7 p.m. So, and then there's an after party sponsored by TikTok. So bring your phones, from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. at Sushi Confidential, which there is a one-way shuttle going to be driving people to Sushi Confidential. So you can hop on that. It'll be directly following the Augie Award ceremony. There'll be also some complimentary drinks and food provided there. Tomorrow's special event, they have an event wrap-up and the Best in Show announcement. That is at 3:45 tomorrow afternoon. Food is available for purchase in the Hyatt if you haven't already. They got good salads, got a nice pizza pie over there, and tall beers, which is always great. Social, be sure to tag #AWE 2022 and make everybody hit the FOMO that's not here. Recording of sessions, just a reminder that all sessions are being recorded and will be made available for in-person, for virtual attendees, or for yourself, for any, the ones that you didn't get to see, which is always awesome when you're standing outside networking over a tall beer. Wi-Fi, the network is AWE_Wi-Fi, password welcome, ! All lowercase and exclamation point. So finally, just a thank you to the sponsors. The AWE team would like to thank the gold sponsors for their support: Arbor XR, HoloLight, HP, Meta, Niantic, Care AR, Metadome, Snap, TikTok, Soar, and Meta Materials. Some pretty cool names there pitching in to support the XR community. It's great. And also a big thanks to the Titanium sponsors: Avatar, with two A's, Magic Leap, Qualcomm, and Unity Technologies. All a really great lineup of speakers, or of sponsors. Thank you all for joining this track. Pretty great lineup. Excited to hear from this. First off, we're going to kick it off with a investor Q&A AMA, hosted by David Hines of FOV Ventures, along with Gregory Castle of Anorak Ventures, Kristina Serafim of Verizon Ventures, and Moritz Baier-Lentz from BITKRAFT Ventures. I hope I didn't just massacre your names, but please, welcome to the stage, your first panel, and it's going to be a kind of an interesting opportunity for you to be able to ask these venture group leaders some cool questions. And I'll be having a mic to walk around, so just raise your hand whenever you have a question, and I'll be happy to walk up. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Ben. This one? Yeah. Can you hear me? Yes, perfect. All right, so thanks for coming. Yeah, we want to try and make this session as interactive as possible. So there's a few of you here. We'd love you to be thinking about questions. I know, from having previously been a founder myself, it's kind of, you run around these conferences and you just want to get in front of some VCs and, pitch a company or ask some questions. So we want to kind of really open that up in this session. I will start with a few questions just so we can kind of orientate, which funds are on the panel, what these guys are interested in, but make sure that you're thinking of some questions. If you guys are very shy and you don't have any questions, I have lots to ask these guys, so don't worry. But yeah, be thinking. We'll probably in about 10 minutes we'll open it up for Q&A. Cool, excellent. So just some introductions myself. My name's Dave Haynes. I'm from FOV Ventures. We're a very new fund. We're based in Europe, in London and Helsinki. We focus mostly on founders in Europe, but at the earliest stage, so pre-seed and seed. We really just specialize in Metaverse, so the Metaverse in the broadest sense, and we write checks of between 200 and 500K. So I'm going to now pass it down the line and get you guys to pitch your fund. So Greg, tell us about Anorak. What's the fund? Where do you invest, etc.?
Sure. Hi guys. Greg Castle, Anorak Ventures. We invest all over the world. In companies largely being built around differentiated technology. So spend a bunch of time in areas like VR and AR, computer vision, robotics, AI and ML. But investing really at the earliest stages, and it's really about the team and their passion and their unique point of view on the world. And so, we don't just invest in these areas. We also just invest in general SaaS businesses as well. But certainly see a bright future ahead for gaming and XR, and are investing quite a bit in the field. Thanks.
Kristina?
Thank you. I'm Kristina Serafim. I'm Managing Director at Verizon Ventures. We are a strategic VC arm for Verizon, and we invest in early stage companies in a variety of technology areas, with Metaverse being definitely one of the key areas we spend time on. We invest, in addition to Metaverse, some of the same tech spaces that you mentioned, computer vision, robotics, smart manufacturing, security as well, a lot of data management, ML, AI. On the Metaverse side, we focus on platforms and applications that leverage 5G and edge. That's a key aspect of us considering where we should, which companies we should partner and invest in. And early stage for us is typically A and B rounds. So we've done some very late stage seed investments, late seed or pre-A, so a little bit later stage than you guys focus on. And we invest for both financial as well as strategic standpoint.
Awesome. Moritz?
Thank you. Thanks for coming, everyone. You should be asking us tough questions, because otherwise I'm just going to be boring. So I'm with BITKRAFT Ventures. I'm a partner there. I joined about 2 years ago. We now manage just shy of $800 million across 6 funds. Started as an esports fund in 2016, became broadly a gaming fund, I'd say around 2018, and then since, I'd say like late 2019, I think Metaverse fund actually fits us quite well. We have about 100 portfolio companies. Half of them are game studios, and the other half are gaming-related or interactive media platforms, and what we call immersive technology, which includes AR, VR, but also technologies like procedural generation for virtual worlds. About 30 people spread between North America and Europe. And yeah, personally, I'm very involved and interested in AR and VR. We've announced our investment in Trip yesterday. Awesome one that I'm really excited about, meditation for VR. Nanea and her team are here as well. Arcturus is here, volumetric video company. OpenBCI, a brain-computer interface company that just announced their partnership with Vario. and InWorld, a company that focuses on agents in digital worlds and procedural generation on the logic side around characters.
Yeah, awesome. And Moritz, you preempted the next question, so I'd love to get like just maybe 1 or 2 companies from your portfolio that really kind of are in this space and what made you invest. So Kristina, any recent examples of investments in this space?
Yes, some of the recent investments and some of my favorites include Lightfield Lab, which is a holographic interactive display platform technology. Status Pro, which is in the VR sports space. YBVR, real-time VR streaming. FCF, which is a combination of gaming and sports, but they do have an AR and VR component to their platform as well that they're working on. So definitely, we continue to look at a lot of companies in the space, both on the industrial side as well as the consumer side. Some of the ones that I mentioned happen to be more B2B2C, basically, because of one of the categories for us. A key category is sports, both on the investment side as well as broadly speaking, Verizon's initiative around next-gen stadiums and connectivity, 5G connectivity and edge in the stadiums and arenas.
Yeah. Greg?
So three recent investments we made. Scenario, which we're really excited about, which is a reality capture company. And they are using, basically use your smartphone to capture objects and then kind of remix them and do different things with them. Really excited about them. They're coming out on the App Store soon. Inner World is another one that we recently invested in, which is a mental health app for the Metaverse, a safe and kind of curated community where people can go and talk about the issues of life and work with coaches. And Prisms is another one, which is an education company, which is focused on STEM K through 12, really enabling kids to learn in new ways, including in leveraging spatial in order to better understand concepts in math and science. They're working with a whole bunch of school districts and getting a lot of great traction, so we're excited about them. Those are 3 recent.
Yeah, nice. And also Living Cities recently.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, Matt was on stage yesterday, and I think he's on stage today as well. I'm incredibly excited about them as well. So they're essentially building a digital twin of starting with select parts of the world and enabling kind of new forms of interactivity for people, whether or not you're there on site or you're viewing from elsewhere, either in VR or on a 2D screen. It was founded by Matt, who previously founded a company called 60, which I also funded, and they sold to Niantic. And Dennis, who was previously the founder of Foursquare, and John, who was previously one of the main creatives on Matrix. So they really put together a dynamite team.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, for us, I mean, so we've just launched the fund, so we've made 5 investments, but actually none of them are public yet, so I won't spoil those. But we do a few angel investments we did before the fund, so companies like Ready Player Me, the cross-platform avatar system, and also actually Living Cities. So yeah, hopefully we'll all have some good portfolio in common. Cool. So I was going to ask next if there's any particular themes that you guys are excited about, but maybe we can bring some controversy in already. What are some themes that you're not interested in, or things where you're like, oh God, just don't pitch me this, or something that's like feels played out and you're moving on to other areas? So yeah, maybe Moritz, any controversial views on something you're not interested in, or maybe some areas that you want to dive in where you think other people are missing it?
Yeah, we get about, I'd say like 10 to 20 pitches per day, and 80% of the headlines include Metaverse or Web3. And I think my pet peeve is using that as a marketing, mechanism to get investor attention when the core is quite hollow. I don't think, honestly, investors care about you checking the Metaverse or like Web3 box. Like they'll ideally, and I'd say the good investors from whom you'd like to raise money will see right through that. I actually like to, we help our companies with fundraising in the following rounds as well, advising them, or even in some cases we get pretty hands-on with marketing materials and fundraising presentations. So we obviously help make connections to relevant VCs or strategics. And I'm always a big fan of not leaning too much into the marketing lingo. Obviously, you want to educate people about the market you're after, but you can typically describe that in a way that doesn't necessarily involve those words, because let's face it, the metaverse isn't really there yet, and what you're doing can probably also be described with words that were meaningful a year or two ago. And then on the Web3 side, I think we'll get over the fact that right now everyone is running around and touting how they solve their backend. I don't care if you use Web3 or Web2. I don't care if you use Amazon Cloud or Google Cloud for your backend. The question is, for a game, is it fun? The question for a platform is, who will pay some money for it? And that's really that's how we like to look at these things that land in our inboxes.
Yeah, but you guys also have your crypto fund, right? So how do you look at stuff that's in Web3, or do you pass that over to the team that focuses on it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Because we're about to announce it, I guess. We have a lot of fresh capital for Web3. It's definitely an area that we're excited about. I think it's also an area where there's a big discrepancy between that marketing part and then the substance, but there are a lot of exciting opportunities there, and we find great deals there. Our team is in principle working on all topics, but we have carved out now, I think, 5 people internally that probably spend 80% of their time on crypto and Web3. For us, that's always Web3 gaming. We don't do Web3 that doesn't have to do with gaming and interactive media.
Got it. And Kristina, any areas that Verizon is just like, well, actually, that's not for us, or things where you're like, well, we've already got an interest in here, so we're not looking so much?
I mean, we look at, we don't look at studios typically, or we look at technically differentiated platforms or applications, really. Is there a technical differentiation that also leverages 5G and edge? And from that perspective, I come from a similar standpoint that a lot of companies just try to squeeze in 5G and Mac in the pitch, but sometimes it's relevant, other times it's not. We don't look at a lot of direct to consumer, to be honest. The reason being is that we are looking at ways to integrate the technology within the Verizon ecosystem, within the Verizon tech stack. So if it's, even though some of the companies I mentioned, we have made some direct-to-consumer investments, but it is probably the exception rather than the norm.
Greg, any contrarian views that you're holding right now?
Yeah, so I'll take a slightly different approach here. So I think that I'm a believer, and I think everybody on this stage is a believer. Probably everybody in this conference is a believer in terms of a similar view of where we think the future is going. But I think when I hear pitches that are creating products for where that future is going without explaining necessarily how they're going to survive until that future arrives, that's when I kind of tend to bow out. So AR is a good example. I think we've all probably heard pitches about companies that are building the infrastructure for when we all have glasses on, and whether or not it's a storage of information or a game or a social app or whatever it is for what that future potentially is going to look like. I think we've all heard the pitch. That said, we are quite far away still from glasses that the majority of people are wearing. Like, quite far away. I mean, you know, I'm thinking it's somewhere between 5 and 10 years. It could be a little bit more, but that's what I'm thinking. And so if you're creating a company today for that future, I need you to tell me what you're going to be doing for the next 5 years while these glasses are still in development. It's always a unique challenge, I think, for founders that they encounter, which is they have to sell on the dream of what the future looks like and what they have the potential to become. They've got to do that, but they also have to be able to effectively communicate what the steps are going to be for them to get to that massive future. And so it's this kind of delicate balance that they have to walk of like, this is the billion-dollar opportunity, and this is how we're going to start getting there as of 3 weeks when the money hits the bank. And I don't need you to connect all the dots for me, but I need you to at least have a good answer and a good explanation of what you're going to be doing for the next year or so while this technology is still in development.
Just 2 quick points on that. Similarly, the thing that doesn't matter, at least for me, as much as whether you're going after a $10 billion or $50 billion or $200 billion market. Honestly, if you get anywhere close to like $1 billion in revenue, that's just fine for me. So the pitch should be more focused on who are actually the first customers that are paying $10,000 a month. Like, I'd rather walk through your current pipeline of like 60 conversations, who's in discussion, who might actually be paying money in 2 months, versus arguing whether this is kind of like a $50 billion or $200 billion industry, depending on like how you slice and dice it. It's relatively, you know, that kind of like goes in the same direction. And then an example for someone who does what you just described, I think extraordinarily well, with super big dreams, is Elon Musk. Because if you take SpaceX, for example, the goal is to make life a multiplanetary species. Okay, you know, we need people to go after these lofty goals, and I think that's important. But before that, SpaceX is becoming a global internet provider that's kind of in process. And even before that, in the initial years, they just took payload, they took satellites to the sky for others because they were just cheaper launch vehicles. Same with Tesla. The Roadster was a flash. Some people bought it. There was the proof point. There was the ignition. Then an expensive car. Then the mass car, you know, which is the ultimate goal for Tesla, and even Neuralink, you know, brain-computer interfaces. That's a crazy one that's like 10, 20 years out there. So the initial use case is helping quadriplegics that really don't have an option other than, you know, using an invasive PCI to move their limbs. And I think, you know, that those are killer examples, but those are great examples to kind of like think through that exact conundrum, I think.
Yeah, and I think, you know, to build on that point, one of the tricky things, and I think this whole industry is maybe a little bit guilty of, is just market timing. Like, we're all kind of pushing the boundaries, but, you know, there's a lot of people, you know, people like Tip in the front row, you know, investing in VR through the kind of, you know, there was a lot of hype 2015, 2016. There were some great companies born, like people like Rec Room were born in that era, right? But actually the market was very slow to take off. So at the moment I see with Metaverse, we've got this second wind of this whole industry, but it's still the expectations are being set here by the media. And I think as a startup, you just need to ground yourself on, yeah, kind of what's the actual market there today. And I think the other sin that I see with a lot of companies is there's a lot of technical people in this space, right? They're really tinkering around with these, you know, new things that we can do with all this new technology. But it's like, I think as investors, we just want to see what's the problem that you're solving, what's the kind of the need that you have, versus, well, this is technically possible. Now let's go and find, you know, I've got a solution. Now I'm going to go and find the problem, and that's usually quite a turnoff. But right, I'm going to turn it round to the audience now and see if we've got some questions. So hopefully you've been thinking of some particularly tough questions. And just before I do that, just to get a read of who's in the room, hands up if you're an investor, another investor in this space that's in the room. Okay, so founders, make note of who's here. And who's a founder in the room? Okay, lots of founders. Who hasn't raised any money yet or is looking for their first round? Okay, great. Good luck. Okay, so let's. We have a question here in the front row. I think Finn's going to come around with the mic. No shilling. Feel free to pitch your company and what you do, but
check.
let's have a question at the end of the shill, please.
Hi, I'll start with a question. So I'm running a company that we have customers. We're raising our Series A right now. We've done kind of what Greg, I think you like to see, or what you mentioned. We've started out by getting a bunch of big global brands that pay us money, and we could actually bootstrap it if we wanted to, but we'd be missing the big opportunity if we didn't raise the money. One of the questions that comes up when you talk to a tier 1 VC is some of the older ones, at least that I know from past in my career, they get nervous when you start saying that one of my big customers, or actually in my case, 3 of my big customers want to invest in our company. They want to be in the round. And they've already promised they don't want to be on the board. But how do you feel about that? When you see there's a lot of corp dev interest in the company. And just to add one little twist on it, we've got traction, but the big pitch, the metaverse pitch, I'm avoiding using that word, but there are many things that are inevitable, and that is the big opportunity. But we can make revenue as we go to that opportunity.
Kristina, do you want to take should you have a strategic on the cap table, and how do fellow investors,
That's okay. It's okay if we're not wanted. No, I'm typically, we typically don't lead the rounds. We are typically one of the investors with the most common structure being a financial VCs leading the round. And as I mentioned earlier, we invest for both strategic and financial purposes. We actually, on the financial side, the benefit of having strategic investors is that there is some more patience and flexibility as far as the financial returns. And that enables us to sometimes that's why I said technically differentiated companies like Lightfield Lab that when we invested, they were a few years out from go to market and launching, but we saw a very unique differentiated tech and a team that can execute on that and get to that point. Perhaps that's not the type of profile of an investment that a financial VC wants to see, where they want to see revenue and customers within the next year, let's say. So, we try to be hopeful as an investor in the rounds. We actually take a board observer seat as opposed to a board seat. So, and the objective of that is to really be the liaison to the internal organization, where we also have a portfolio management team, business development team that works with our portfolio companies to help them engage with the various business units and customers and the whole ecosystem, that we can help the companies grow and accelerate that the strategic benefit they extract by also taking an investment from someone like a Verizon Ventures. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll keep it spicy. I have a different opinion on some of these. I mean, first of all, we love having strategic investors in our syndicate. Like, we typically lead rounds. We probably lead about 80% of our deals. Last one we did, Trip, is actually a good example, where we led the round and then we brought in Niantic, HTC, Qualcomm, and Amazon Ventures. Awesome for Trip because it also broadens the ecosystem and platforms on which they can develop. Especially Niantic, I thought was interesting because it helps them bring the product also from VR meditation to AR meditation. So strategics are great for various reasons. They can actually support they can be customers, they can help you get your product out there, distribution, and many other things. I would never take value add for granted. If you can, I would even kind of like define what is expected and kind of like, you might even tie a board observer seat to certain performance metrics that, if not fulfilled, the board observer seat gets revoked. To me, this is kind of like bringing an advisor on board, where people sometimes give away equity and then nothing happens ever after. So if the other side really feels strongly about the value they can bring, they should be confident in like putting it on paper and like kind of like putting some meat to it, would be my advice. I would generally not give board observer seats to strategics, just because then you kind of like, you're in a situation where future strategics or other customers might be a little bit spooked by the fact that there is a strategic who has proprietary information. I'd probably avoid information rights if you can. I know, sorry, this is not very helpful. But yeah, I mean, like, we create syndicates with strategics and VCs or financial investors. Like, sometimes strategics will tell you they're a financial investor. I mean, usually it carries the name of a company, so I always find that a bit entertaining, to be honest. But yeah, I think it's great if it's done right. And those are my 2 cents on ideally as a founder, how you would do it right.
Let me chime in here real quick, because I think we probably have a lot of people to get to, so I don't want to spend too much time. But I would just say that the devil's in the details on this one. And if you think about it from the perspective of a financial investor, why are they not particularly interested in strategics getting involved, right? Well, because some of those strategics down the road could potentially be acquirers, and it has the potential to kind of narrow down your optionality in the future, right? And so if you can get people on board who you think are going to be helpful, then I think that that's great. And then depending on, to what was said beforehand, like it is, are they on the board? Yes, no. Do they have information rights? Like if you can just kind of switch for a second and switch to the perspective of a Sequoia investor who's like, I want to take this company public. Like I don't want an early acquisition. I don't want stuff like that. Switch to that mindset and then plan accordingly with that particular.
Ask the question, like, all right, would you be okay if I go to your number 1 competitor? I always ask that, or do you,
Yeah, I've seen it both sides. So before FOV Ventures, I was investing at HTC for ViveX, and there was definitely some companies where that didn't matter. It was like, well, actually, this is validation. The generalist investor loved that there was validation because they were new to that particular space. But yeah, there were definitely some companies which were like, oh, actually, if we take that investment, then does that hinder our relationship with Meta or Pico or other competitors? So I think it is in the details. But I want to get to another spicy question. So do we have anyone in the room who has a challenging question? Yep, in the middle there.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, so right now with the space being so early, everyone's kind of, especially in the XR space, everyone's kind of waiting for something big to happen. But on the other hand, there's a lot of companies in the VR space, who say like a game studio, who already has a lot of traction. So on one hand, you have someone coming to you with big market potential, but not much traction at all. Maybe further down the line, if you keep waiting, there could be something there. And then on the other hand, you have something that's the market size is much smaller, but they can actually show you something. Like how you determining the dichotomy of these two.
So when we invest, we kind of like have 2 criteria. One is with all the different possible outcomes that we see from here for this company, putting probabilities against it, what that would mean in terms of potential exit and like how much dilution we have to expect to get there. Ideally, we see like opportunities with kind of like a 5 to 10x like risk-adjusted weighted return profile. That's one criterion. And the other is, can this be a fund returner? Can this company, if it really kicks ass, return the entire fund? For that, it needs to be kind of like a 100x case. I at least want to see that path. So ideally, there's enough of a market size there with the growth that's happening, and the time frame for to be a 100x investment is 5, 6, 7 years. It doesn't need to be next year. And this is obviously, even if it happens, or even if it's in the periphery, it's a low probability event, but can it be the case? And there are some companies where simply the last is a no, and then it's less interesting for us. you don't need a $100 billion industry to create a 100x return. On the VR side specifically, I think VR is interesting for VCs right now because funds are designed as 10-year vehicles usually, and in those 10 years, looking at the install base, a lot is going to happen. I think a lot of people don't recognize that in 24, 25, we'll probably have more XR shipments than console shipments. So everyone thinks like Sony PlayStation and Microsoft Xbox is huge. Well, 25 will probably see more AR and VR shipments than like combined game consoles at around like 50 million units or so. All right. That's pretty interesting for VCs. That's probably more effective on the VR side than AR. And for the games and IP in VR, the tricky part is even if you are a top-selling game today, you're only selling to an install base of what, like 10, 15 million. What guarantees me that you will also be a #1 hit in 3 years when you have this 50 million install base? So we're kind of like looking for companies. We're looking for the companies that can be #1 in 3 years, a little bit less so than #1 this year.
Just on the fund return point, because I think it's, I see a lot of entrepreneurs come and they're like, oh, you don't think I'm going to be big enough, and oh, these VCs are asking me to be a $10 billion company, and I think it is really worth getting your head around that venture math, and people like Moritz are thinking this needs to be a fund returner. There is a nuance to that as well, because different VCs have different expectations. Like if you've got an 800 million fund, like that, the kind of where you need to be, like if you take money from an Andreessen or someone, they need the things that are really going to move the needle. Whereas actually there's also smaller funds or, angels, your first investors, they might have very different expectations where, a quicker 3x or something. So it's worth asking your investors, maybe, in that first conversation, just understanding what are their expectations and adjusting accordingly.
I would say, you asked an either/or question, and I would say it shouldn't be or, it should be and. And I think that I'm not necessarily looking for traction today in the form of revenue, but I'm looking for traction. I'm looking for some data points that show me that you guys are progressing and moving in the right direction. So I want you to be able to tell me how this becomes a massive opportunity. But I also want you to show how you're going to get there. And even in situations where the technology isn't there yet, in AR, for example, there are still things that you can do in the intermediate, I think, before glasses are ubiquitous, to be able to demonstrate progress, be able to demonstrate some form of traction.
Cool. Let's maybe go to another question. We've got somebody in the front here, this lady.
So I think you're talking a lot about having an investment that gives you 100x in return, which makes a lot of sense in every other field. But when you're in a field that's so new, that's arguably only 5 years old, how are you measuring that 100x that it's going to give you when we haven't really seen anything that is at 100x yet? How are you figuring out if that is an investment that is going to give you 100x in return?
Well, Oculus did it, and they were at the beginning, right? And so I think if you're able to sell people on the dream, you're able to do things to get people excited about it, they will come. I mean, so much of this is people blazing their own trail, whether or not you're talking about Oculus or you're talking about Magic Leap. I mean, regardless of where they're at today, but still, Elon Musk, Tesla, the best founders out there are selling this vision of what's to come in the future and taking steps to get there. Now, you wouldn't match up Oculus's revenue at the time that they sold to Facebook. The multiple wouldn't make sense, right? They had sold, 10,000 plus headsets when they were bought for $3 billion. But they were able to share and they were able to demonstrate demand. They were able to effectively communicate what a future might look like that got Mark excited about the opportunity?
There are a couple 100x investments today in AR, VR.
I mean, and it's also, I think, it's really not a 5-year field. I was on this stage 2011 with one of the AR companies, and that the industry started even much before that. It's an evolution. I guess Metaverse is an evolution of immersive tech, which is an evolution, AR and then VR. So I think if we look at over the years, there are definitely some investments that even, for example, we have in our portfolio that were early investments, great tech, but there wasn't a product market fit. And so had to wait to really, for that tech to find the right use case and start to generate returns from there. So that's really the hard part as an investor, to project that. Given some early data, a lot of the companies are early in their launch and evolution. So taking some of that early traction that they may be seeing with users or customers and projecting the growth from there, that is, I guess, the objective that we have.
One thing about the traction and product market fit also is in a field like AR, VR, that will also change so much over the course of the fund or over the course of a company, and even in kind of like a 3 to 5 year period. Demonstrating the traction is not only a showcase that there will be revenue, or that there is revenue, or that revenue is growing. It also shows that there is a commercial mindset there, and that there is someone at the company who constantly thinks about how what exists today inside the company can actually be relevant to an audience, whether that be consumers or whether that be enterprises or both. Because the truth is, like with companies, especially when you invest at the seed stage or A stage, what they do by the time they exit, if it is a sizable exit, usually it has changed quite a bit. And if you review like pitch decks, even from the great companies that we all know, even like Airbnb or Uber and all of these, if you look at the initial pitch deck versus who they are today or what they got sold at, it changed. Sometimes it's actually quite entertaining. I mean, a lot of these pitch decks are public, but we still mostly invest in people in the early stages. Obviously, especially in AR, VR, there needs to be a strong technology component too. But in the end, you just need stewards of companies that can like navigate these waters, can be capital preservant when times are tough, can like come up with something new and exciting when it's needed to kind of like steer the company around. And yeah, that's why traction is important too.
Yeah, I was going to make the same point about the team, and to your point, I think as an investor in this space, it is actually quite difficult, right? Because we just don't know. Like, something, could go really big, or, there's some unlock or technical unlock in 3 years which allows somebody to go really big. We just don't know. So it is, and it's easy to forget this as an investor, you're kind of also just backing the team to be able to make those pivots, right? And to give an example, so I first met the guys from Ready Player Me in Estonia. I was at a firm called Seacamp, and there were kind of 3 or 4 guys. I was super impressed because they just were hustling. They were really driven, like really passionate about what they were doing. But the business they actually had, they weren't called Ready Player Me. They were called Wolf 3D, and they were doing, the first idea that they had was they were 3D. They were taking like pregnancy scans and then 3D printing them, and that was like, oh, this is a bit weird. That's not working. Then they moved to, they had these. I remember on my way back out, they had these like eggs. So they had these like photo booths where you would go in, and I remember paying like €5 into this egg like machine thing. And it gave me I put the money in, and it sent me a Sketchfab link with my full scan. And I remember thinking, I really like the team, but this is not investable. Like this these eggs are just not going to scale. Like this is a hardware business, etc. Now I was wrong. Like what I should have seen was actually this team is amazing. They're going to hustle, and they pivoted, a couple of models then into what they are today. So it's one of these things where you get these overnight successes that have actually taken 6 years, you know?
And through the scans from the eggs, they basically collected a lot of proprietary facial and body data that helped with the machine learning algorithms for the avatar creation. So that's kind of like the link there.
We've got 7 minutes left. I think we've probably got time for at least 2 questions. So, yeah, this gentleman here had his hand up first with the glasses.
How's it going? I'm Phil. Work for Unity. The macro situation, curious about your take on that. So crypto tech stocks have crashed in the last 6 months. This kind of like a speculative crash like the dot-com era. This is a financial crash like the financial crisis, great financial crisis. And then to keep it spicy, for your portfolio companies, are you taking markdowns? Are you writing as many checks this May as you did last May? And how does that, how does that play out for existing portfolio companies and your prospective companies?
So I am not an economist, but I will say that I think I think we were flying a little bit high beforehand, and it was just really getting silly, and I think that. The correction in the markets has slowly but surely kind of trickled down through the stages, through the private market stages. Initially, of course, because the late stages, Series Ds and Es are, you've got that direct comp to what's happening in the public markets. You could see multiples, and it was kind of clear as day when the markets really tanked that the IPO figures that some of these guys were targeting were going to have to be adjusted, and therefore valuations were adjusted in the private markets. And so that hit first, and then it kind of moved into the middle markets as well, because late stage companies weren't getting the same valuations. And now I think it's in the early stages as well. I think that there is and it's interesting to a lot of the things that we were talking about today, we are as venture investors naturally are investing ahead of their skis a little bit, but in areas like this in emerging technology, we're investing way ahead of the curve. And so, so I think that areas of emerging technology that were kind of selling on the dream beforehand, where revenue is kind of nowhere to be seen, I think, and those valuations really were getting silly. The Metaverse valuations, the Web3 valuations. And so now I'm seeing a correction there. That said, I think the top founders who come out with a certain pedigree are always in high demand, and the larger funds are continuing to invest under that archetype of, I went to Stanford, I'm spinning out of Google, and those guys and gals are still getting strong valuations. Where the opportunity is, where I'm looking for, is those people who didn't come out of Stanford, those people who didn't come out of Google, just people who have a certain work ethic and a certain perspective on the world. And I think there is where you're more able to see a correction. I wouldn't say I'm slowing down, but I am being more thoughtful about investments, and in speaking to other people in the industry, as from one end of the spectrum to the other, from angel investors who are more hit by the markets to the marquee funds who say that they're, who are puffing out their chest and we're not slowing down. They're slowing down. That's BS. Because I've had individual conversations with them who have told me so. So I think everybody is taking a bit more of a thoughtful approach now to what's happening.
Well, first of all, the Stanford folks, they work hard too. That's how they got there.
Fair.
No, on the question of where does it go from here? I worked at Goldman for 5 years with some of the best traders in the world, and you ask two of them, you get two different answers. I think the market's worth what it's worth today. All fears, expectations, hopes, and dreams are priced in as of today's market price, so no one knows. I could not tell you with any confidence whether it looks better in 6 months or not. Feels like it's going to look worse just because of the inflation overhang, but that's really a really hard, tricky statement. And a lot of our LPs are, very large family offices, billionaires, hedge funds that focus a lot more on public markets. And again, you ask two of them and they come back with you with two wildly different answers. I wouldn't focus too much on where valuations are in 6 months. What can be said with certainty is that especially financial investors are a lot more careful now to make investments. Ironically, there's still a lot of funding, a lot of venture funds just raised a lot of money, a lot of VC capital has been raised. So people are looking to deploy. I think the rounds that are hit the hardest are Series A rounds, pre-traction. That's probably the hardest round to raise right now and where people are the most nervous. One thing with regards to strategic investors from early on, they are a little bit less valuation sensitive. So if you're especially in a seed Series A fundraise right now, strategics might actually be an interesting option. On our portfolio, we have of the 100 companies. I mean, obviously, some are going great, some are going not so great, some are just starting out. We've definitely encouraged folks to go out by now if they were kind of looking to raise even within the next 12 months, just because there is a slowdown on the financial investing side, and that's undeniable. I think you want to kind of make the closing statement here.
Well, just one more. Historically, we've seen companies, some of the best companies coming out of being launched and raising money during a recession. And I think VC investments are a long-term asset. So the good companies, I think, will continue to be able to raise money, whether they come from Stanford or not.
Yeah, to end on an optimistic note, so, from prior experience, I was part of the founding team at SoundCloud, and we started in 2008. We were raising in kind of late 2008, 2009 for our first institutional VC. The market sentiment was way down, but actually, if you look at that year, 2002, 2008, 2009, some of the really big companies like, the Twitters and that crop of companies that made it really big in the Web 2 era, they came in that time. So I think, the rallying cry to all the founders is the signal to noise, I think, will go up because a lot of this is shaken out a lot of the tourists that are coming in and riding off the buzz. So if you're building something, this is the time to build. You can get talent more easily. It's just a great time to get your heads down. Hopefully you can come to someone like us, raise some money, and we'll back you through to the next round. So thanks for listening. I want to thank you guys for being awesome and giving some good insights, and also thanks to your questions. We do need to wrap now, but please stick around. We've got some amazing startups that will be pitching. So investors in the room, stick around, and also we look forward to seeing what you're building. So thank you.